Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is reflections and how we often see ourselves in others. And that can get really confusing, especially when we're trying to work through challenging issues. And so we're going to talk about the complexity of this reflection and the hall of mirrors that can result from it, and how we can find our way navigating through these very, very interesting dynamics. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to be here with you this morning, and welcome to everybody else who's joining us. Before we get started on our topic of reflections, let's take a minute or two to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, and creating this brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together, vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's Friday and another week has just flown by. It could get whiplash for as quickly as these weeks pass. It's remarkable. Anyway, reflections. This came up in a session. Interestingly enough, this came up in a session around trust, where the client was saying that they had issues of trust and they weren't sure. They thought that they were questioning as to whether they may have lost their trust in me, which was a really interesting thing to navigate with them. And they went through a whole list of their feelings, like feeling not just specific to me, but around trust, because trust was a really big issue for them. And so along with that, they were talking about feeling manipulated, unappreciated, betrayed, disappointed. There was a whole litany of emotions that occurred in relation to this issue of trust. And at the end there, it went back to a parental figure who had left when they were a kid. And this is a lens. It created a lens through which they've experienced other relationships and challenges since that time. Anyway, it was very, very interesting to me because I've been thinking about it, and that's a big thing, to me. If somebody feels that somehow they've lost trust in me, they were really clear that it wasn't anything I did. And it was very, very interesting because we had an agreement that they have not upheld. One of the things that they said is, I guess I should have called this reflections and projections. One of the things that they said is, why can't people just keep their word? And talking about integrity. And it was so interesting because this person and I are in the midst of navigating a situation where we had an agreement that they haven't upheld. And in thinking about it, it was a revelation actually for me to recognize that a lot of the emotions that they were saying they were experiencing around issues of trust were at play in the way that I was experiencing or feeling toward them that I hadn't even been aware of. Actually, it was sort of a subtext, but over this broken agreement and the way that the agreement had been maneuvered. And so I got to do work on myself around my issues of trust, particularly with this person. And I just found it so fascinating how everything they were saying was actually something that I was experiencing. And so here they're projecting onto me or other people this lack of integrity that was present within them. And then if I take it to the next place, bring it back to myself, it's like, well, where am I exhibiting a lack of integrity? Am I doing that? And it occurred to me, that I really hadn't had the complete conversation with this person. And, that maybe their thought about having lost trust in me had to do with my losing trust in them. And then it just keeps going on. It's like a house of mirrors, where it just reflects and reflects and reflects, and it becomes very difficult to distinguish what's me and what's them. And maybe it's all one. And I wonder for yourself if you've ever encountered a situation where someone says, I feel like you, blah, 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 blah. And you, in fact, feel like they've done exactly what they're accusing you of. Or that you feel exactly the way that they're expressing that they feel. And so it becomes such a murky kind of situation. It's very fascinating to me to be looking at this. When these kinds of things are encountered, it's easy to fall into judgment and making people wrong, making yourself wrong. And instead of judging it, it can be very, very helpful to look at it with curiosity, to say, wow, 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 what a crazy dynamic. What's going on here? And it's fascinating. It was reassuring to me to have this person say, that they were really clear that I hadn't done anything that was out of integrity or that was a violation in any way. And I'm wondering if the reason they were feeling that is because I was feeling distrustful of them without even being fully aware of that. So it's like, what's me and what's not me? And maybe it's all me. Maybe it's all you. Like maybe that's the limit of the world that we can experience is our own projections and reflections, because we have the lens through which we experience life and through which we interpret life. And it's just it's so remarkably complex in its way, that it's hard to, I mean, I don't know that I can find any kind of definitive answer, so the thing about curiosity is not necessarily having the need to find an answer as much as being in the inquiry, to be willing to be present to the inquiry, in a way that we can learn something new, perhaps. So without the judgment, without the finger pointing, without the blame and shame, just awareness, just to be becoming more cognizant of the dynamic or the pattern, or how all this stuff integrates. It's fascinating to me and confusing too. I find it, I guess it's confusing if I'm trying to figure it out, rather than just letting it unfold. But so as a result of this inquiry and awareness, it makes me aware that there's more opportunity there for discovery, for self-discovery, and also for this other person. If there's a way that I can reflect back the experience in a way that can be of service to them, then it'll feed back to me too, I imagine. It goes full circle. So it's so interesting. I don't know if you have had this experience, but so many of you are healer type people, that the person that is there that we're working with is, in partnership, is a reflection of ourselves. And the thing that I so love about the work that I do is that my clients reflect all different aspects of myself, or I see myself in all my clients. And of course I would, right? I mean, I imagine you must as well, right? Even the things that get us most upset are in other people, are typically things that we see in ourselves. And, when we get really reactive about somebody else's behavior, it's actually often a reflection of our own. And when we approach those triggering situations from that vantage point, it's like, wow, why did that upset me so much? Why did I get so upset over that? What's happening that in me that is allowing that level of reactivity? And so when we engage in that kind of inquiry, then there's a richness available to us. That's life giving us the opportunity to learn and deepen and grow in our connection. And one of the things that I say over and over in regard to this notion of trust is that all trust is self-trust ultimately. And that may or may not be true. That's like one of my operating hypotheses, but it's interesting because what I noticed is when I was feeling the distrust toward this other person, what it was questioning myself and my decision to have allowed some flexibility in this agreement that I might not otherwise have allowed. And so it was, again, a proof of this notion that all trust is self-trust. Like, I questioned myself, I questioned my decision, my willingness to allow the flexibility or the shifting of the sands, you know. So it's very fascinating. I'm wondering how you experience that, this notion of projection and reflection. You know, it's not that this person did anything to me that I didn't allow, right? So I'm being accountable and responsible for that, and for my feelings around it too. You know, just to be able to do the work around the trust, to bring myself back to a place of integrity within myself, to be willing to respect my own boundaries, my own limitations. And it's fascinating when you see, like, look at somebody in your life that you get really aggravated by, and look at what it is that aggravates you about them in terms of their behavior. Look at the behavior that they do that really gets to you. And just in a gentle inquiry, without blame or shame, take a look at yourself to see if there's any element of that in yourself. And it may be that you don't have that behavior, but you work really hard not to have that behavior. And therefore, when somebody else has it, it really gets to you. Or it may be that there is a part of you that acts in that way, and that you're not, you know, that you're struggling with, or you're not even conscious of, you know, that there's a part of you that's doing the same thing. So Rosalind says, as boundaries begin to dissolve, it becomes more inseparable. Reflections, are you the disowned me? Are you my wisdom, my real aspiration? We begin to get curious. Then, without realizing it, we express outwardly and mirror what we have been experiencing internally. Very, very interesting, right? This dynamic. And I love the questions. Are you my disowned self? Are you my wisdom, my real aspiration? You know, when we see somebody doing something that we wish we could do, we might have a jealousy around it, to say, wow, I want to be doing that. How come they get to do that and I don't? Well, they gave themselves permission to do that and you haven't, right? So, you know, that the jealousy is, I want to be able to give myself permission to do that, whatever it might be. Or I can't believe they did that, because you're putting the brakes on yourself to not do that kind of thing, to not behave in that kind of way. It's kind of like when people quit smoking, for instance, or quit drinking, oftentimes they become evangelical about that new behavior. And the reason for that is that they're really trying to maintain it for themselves, that they're challenged by it. And in order to be able to adhere to to be rigorous about maintaining their new stance, they're projecting their judgment, their self-judgment, their judgment of that behavior, whatever, out into the world and to other people. And, you know, it's like when we try to control other people's behavior, or control our circumstances, it's often because we have fear. And so it was also very, very interesting. I was talking to some other people actually who were feeling very, very out of control. And they talked about how when they feel most out of control, what they do is clean. Because, I mean, cleaning is just an awesome way to try to regain control, right? Because we can order our environment. We can impose order. There's some degree of control that we have, where we can put things in their place. We can make sure everything is orderly, and that helps to compensate for the sense of being out of control or afraid. And we often extend that to trying to control the people around us or the behaviors of people around us, because we're projecting our fear or our anxiety outward. And then we try to rein it in by trying to impose control externally. So Rosalind says, so how did the client dismantle the distrust? Was the process to drop into feeling rather than looking for the why the label is there? Excellent question, Rosalind. Thank you for that. So we did a core connection process, and what happened was the client was able to go back to their parent and have some dialogue with their parent that enabled them to expand in their compassion for that other person. And as a result of that compassionate understanding, the distrust dissolved, the mistrust dissolved, because there was a deeper compassion, a deeper connection. So what is mistrust? Mistrust is detachment, separation, defense. And when we're able to have compassion and understanding for the other person, then that's bringing us closer. So it helps to just in an automatic way heal the distrust or the mistrust. Thank you for asking that question. Because really, when we think about oneness and separation, you can't have mistrust without separation, right? So if we're able to bridge that sense of separation, then we can heal the mistrust if we can find a space of connection. And so mistrust is, we talked about dragons this week and befriending dragons. At least I intended to. I'm not sure if that one got aired. But the thing about befriending dragons is these behaviors, these negative talk cycles, these negative behaviors, and negative in quotes, typically have a positive intention. And so this notion of mistrust or distrust is coming from a sense of self-protection, right? So what'll happen is that we put up a defense. That's what mistrust or distrust is. It awakens us to the need to defend, to be on the lookout. It's being in high alert. And so it's based in separation. And the antidote to that is connection. So Rosalind says, how do I see myself without distortions? I don't think we can, Rosalind. I truly don't think we can. And that said, one of the ways to minimize the distortion is to release ourselves from judgment and to approach our observations with curiosity, because it's often the judgment that skews our seeing, or the fear of being awful, or which is again judgment, right? So if I can see where I've been untrustworthy, or where I've been trustworthy, or where I've been in or out of integrity, if I can see that without making it that I'm a horrible person, then the likelihood is that I can allow myself to see it better than if I have all these judgments and then I think I'm a horrible person, and I don't really want to be thinking I'm a horrible person. So I'll make myself right at all costs rather than looking at my part. So Rosalind continues, if people around me are reflections, somehow we are seeing ourselves indirectly. Yes, 100%. So is knowing yourself directly the practice? How do I know what's real? It's so funny that you asked that question. It's the question, right? That's been the question of my life. What's real and what's not real? And it depends on whether you're looking for reality with a capital R, which I really don't think we have access to. Not through our humanness anyway. And the reality, what's real with the lowercase r, that becomes part of the house of mirrors, I think. What's real is what we make real, ultimately. And we make that real perhaps through our projections and reflections. And so as we're willing to be more curious, we can use the reflections from the world to better see ourselves. And so we can see ourselves in the world. Like I got to see from my client, I got to see, oh, there's a place where I have lost trust in this person. And underlying that, I've lost trust in the decision that I made. So it's very, very interesting, isn't it? Instead of saying, how could I have been so stupid? Or what's wrong with me that I'm feeling this way? Instead of any of that conversation, to say, wow, isn't it interesting to discover that that's there? And now what? How do we come back from that? How do we heal that? What does it look like to have integrity around that? And those kinds of questions and that kind of observation without judgment, that kind of growing awareness, I think, I'm again hypothesizing, that gets us closer to what's real. What's real, and what's real is this, that there's some kind of filter through which I'm experiencing life and experiencing other people. And it's been really good to have this conversation about trust and mistrust, distrust, because one of the things that this person said is that they felt like they just wanted to retreat more and more and not deal with other people because of this, this disappointment, this deep, deep disappointment. And so very, very, very interesting, because what they need to do is to reconnect to themselves. Like there's a place where they know they're out of integrity, and to reconnect with that, to acknowledge that, and then to in out of curiosity, and then to heal that connection with themselves. So Rosalind says, the mirage in the desert. Yes, 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 yes. Maybe it's all a mirage. I keep walking toward the water and it keeps moving. Thank you for walking beside me in my journey to find the oasis. Oh, Rosalind, likewise, thank you so much for walking beside me in this journey as well. It's always a privilege. And so with that, this is Friday. I wish you a wonderful weekend to all of you. And I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. And I go live here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. And I invite you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network and Enlightened World Living. And until next time, so much love to you.